Hello, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Outdoors podcast. Whether you're new or a returning listener, you are more than welcome. Following on from the last episode, all about the ClimbOut Festival, it was only right that I spoke with one of the main headline speakers that I sadly didn't get a chance to have a proper good catch-up with over the weekend. I was lucky enough to work with Abbie twice in a previous job and always loved being around her, and I loved having this conversation. And I have a funny feeling you're going to like it too. I hope you enjoy. For episode 6, I'm joined by one of the headline speakers from ClimbOut Festival that I sadly missed getting a chance to interview over the weekend. Abbie Robinson is a climber, coach, and sports psychology student currently based in Leeds, having competed for the GB Paraclimbing Team for the last 6 years in the B2 visually impaired category. Since then, she has picked up a whopping 10 gold medals, including 4 consecutive World Championship titles. Beyond the climbing stage, she's keen for any opportunity to get outdoors, whether that's climbing, mountain biking, or swimming. And I would just like to add that being around Abbie is like being around sunshine. She exudes happiness and psych, and I'm incredibly thankful that she's agreed to chat with me. Hello, Abbie, and welcome.
Hello, that was a really nice intro. I'm only cringing a little bit.
I'm not going to apologise because it's all true. First things first, please let myself and the audience know your pronouns and how you identify as part of the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah, sure. So my pronouns are she, her, and I identify as gay. I prefer that sort of like umbrella term, I guess. It's a bit broader, open for a bit more sort of interpretation, and it also feels nice and comfy for me.
So tell us about yourself. Where are you from and where did you grow up?
I'm from the northeast, Sunderland, so people can probably tell by the accent. I grew up like right by the beach in Sunderland, so I don't really think I spent that much time around the beach as a kid, but definitely over lockdown and definitely over more recent years when I've gone to visit home, that's been like my sort of place to just like breathe and chill out, go for a swim, go for a walk, go for a cycle. Just a really nice place to like just take a breath and like I don't know, get some headspace.
It's always so funny that you look at where you grew up so differently, like through a completely different lens when you're older.
Yeah, I think I mean they've done a lot of work on it now, so it's a much nicer place to actually be. I think it was a little bit run down when I was growing up, but I think also just as like I was a completely different person as like a teenager to who I am now. I was like a little computer nerdy kid that pretty much stayed in the house all the time and didn't really go out that much and didn't really socialize, mainly because I didn't have many friends. Um, Whereas like now you can't actually keep me in the house. And I think, yeah, now the kind of person I am now, I'm so grateful to have the beach, even though I don't live at home now. But anytime I go home, I'm just so grateful to have that on my doorstep so that I can go do all sorts and go for a sunrise swim or whatever. Yeah, it's lush.
Talking about your teenage years, how did you get into climbing?
My parents are both scout leaders, and my auntie's a guide leader. So I grew up doing scouts guides. I started off in guides, then did a bit of both for a bit, and then moved over to the dark side and moved over to scouts because that was definitely what suited me the best. I was a proper little tomboy, and at the time, most of my mates were lads. Yeah, I remember going away to like an activity weekend or camp or something. I tried climbing when I was about 5 at this same sort of adventure centre and had to get rescued and because I cried and never went back again. I was like, this is awful. And then I went to this one like activity day and there was like a little bouldering wall that was outside and me and some of the boys had like a challenge to get all the way around without falling off. And I think they stuck to that challenge for like, I don't know, a couple hours. I was like, this is my mission. For the full weekend, I went back every day and I was like, I will get all the way around. And I think by this point they'd probably didn't care at all anymore. But I was adamant I was going to beat the boys. Yeah, it got to the end of the weekend and I finally got all the way around and I was absolutely buzzing with myself. And then immediately went home to my parents and was like, fine to be the local climbing wall. This is going to be my thing now. And I'd been dancing for like 10 years or something, I'd done ballet and other things, mainly ballet. And I'd recently quit. So I was kind of in need of a new thing to do. And actually, the transition from ballet to climbing was a lot. There was a lot more transferable sort of skills and
Yeah,
techniques and
yeah,
stuff
definitely.
that than I would have initially thought. And especially because I always climbed with pointed toes, you could quite easily tell that I came from a ballet background. And I think it served me pretty well so far. And yeah, I pretty much just got obsessed with it immediately. And I think I was very much a bit of an outcast in school. Like, I had friends, but we weren't massively close. I was a bit of a hanger-oner that kind of hung around in the background and was just kind of there. I
Mm.
didn't have super close friends. I was a bit of what people might have called or imagined was like kind of the quote unquote weird kid at school, whatever that might mean, really. And I didn't really ever feel like I fit in. But then when I started climbing, I met a lot of other people that either were like me or were just equally the outcasts, the weird kids. And I think that's kind of what pulled me in. Obviously, I got really hooked on climbing in terms of like the problem solving and just feeling really delicate on the wall and feeling really strong and all of that amazing stuff. But I think just the social side of it and the community that I found where people actually like invited me climbing and like wanted to do stuff with me. It wasn't just, oh, Abby's there, so we should probably invite her. I genuinely felt valued by everyone. And I think that was really huge for me at the time. It was a massive confidence boost and made a huge difference in terms of like my development, I guess, through my teenage years. I think it was super important.
It's wonderful that you were first attracted to the movement of climbing and also having previously done dance, then got into climbing. I just know firstly, my feet are ruined forever. I've just accepted that through point shoes and climbing shoes. The way you talk about being appealed to the movement and then the kind of problem solving challenge side, I think that's something that a lot of people who are new to climbing really need to get introduced to more. And that's what I try to tell people. Like, it is the problem solving side, it is the movement. How are you going to move your body in a different way than you do every other day?
Yeah, I think like for me, that's where I get the most purely intrinsic motivation is like how I feel on the wall. And that's something that I kind of use as motivation when I'm in competitions or when I need to relax, is like to really focus inward on the movement. And like people talk a lot about like process goals over outcome goals or whatever. And something that definitely helped me sort of take the pressure off when I was in competitions was to focus on the movement and focus on like how much of a desire to feel delicate and feel beautiful and feel flowy on the wall. That gives me the most intrinsic sense of satisfaction when I've climbed
Mm.
and kind of helps take the pressure off a little bit. So that's definitely where like I think the root of my passion for climbing is.
You were saying something then about you said quote unquote being the weird kid. That's me quoting you, that's not me saying you were.
I was.
I immediately thought back to Alex Johnson's film, Big Things to Come. Have you
Mhm.
seen that?
I've seen bits of it. I haven't seen it all
Mm.
the way through. I do need to watch it fully.
No, it's okay. There's a bit where she said when she found climbing and she got into comp climbing that she was the weird kid, and then she found this community of all these different people and people she would never have spoken to, and it's all the climbing community is just so weird and wonderful like that. You can just step into a climbing wall and you will make friends or chat to people. It just breaks down so many social barriers.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was something that, like, I was such a shy kid. I was terrified of my own shadow. Yet some of my like best friends that I've still got now or had for many years are people that I just bumped into at a climbing center and just started like sharing beta with. And that's mad because I would have never gone and just spoken to someone. I was so painfully shy, but I don't know, I just kind of felt a bit of I felt the confidence to be able to go do that because everyone was so welcoming. And I think also the kind of strength and empowerment that I found through climbing, I kind of got this confidence. I remember speaking to the parents of a kid that I used to coach, and whenever parents come and talk to me and sort of express how like obsessed their kid is with climbing and how passionate they are and like how much it's been a confidence boost for them, I just see so much of myself in them, and I usually get like a bit emotional. I try not to cry in front of them, but it happens, and it just shows that you care, right? But I remember some parents coming over to me and telling me how much their kid was struggling in school, because I think he had quite severe dyslexia and a few other things that were making school quite challenging, at least in your standard public school, and he wasn't getting the support that he needed. And obviously, from having a visual impairment, I could completely relate to struggling in school and stuff. And he was struggling in like standard PE in school, which I also did, because it was all coordination, team sports, ball sports, and when you're visually impaired, that's really, really hard. But they were saying that since he'd started climbing, he had a massive boost in his confidence, because even though he struggled playing football and he wasn't on the football team, yet all his mates were, he didn't care about being rubbish anymore, or he didn't care about not being the best, shall we say, because he knew that when he went home, he had his own thing. He went off to climbing afterwards, and he had his own thing that he was really good at. And he picked up climbing so quickly and just like really took to it. And it gave him such a confidence, because even though he went back to school and he felt like he was struggling in class, or he felt like he was struggling in PE, he knew that he had his own thing that he was really good at, and that gave him a real sense of empowerment. And I think I got the exact same thing from climbing. It really helped that when I then went back to school and I was starting to struggle because I was struggling to read things in class or keep up with everyone. I was struggling in PE because I couldn't see the ball moving around. Or, I was struggling socially because I can't see people's faces. So walking into a crowded room is the most terrifying thing for me ever. And I thought at the time I was just super socially anxious, but actually it was just that I couldn't see anyone. um, but having climbing and feeling valued in that community and having my thing that I knew I was really good at definitely gave me that sort of inner confidence when I did go into situations that were a bit more challenging, or I went back to school where I felt a bit like an outcast and a bit like the weird kid. It was kind of like, it was almost like I had this little secret, like, yeah, but I know that when I leave here, this cool climber that's really valued and everyone thinks I'm mint. Or like I've got some really good friends over there. So actually it was kind of like quite nice to have that. It definitely gave me a sense of empowerment when I went into situations where I felt less comfortable. I think like climbing can be really powerful in doing that.
I can confirm everyone does think you're a really cool climber. So that's one thing.
Thanks.
You are more than welcome. One thing, one thing I love about adventure sports, I mean specifically climbing, that's always going to be my number one, but I just want all my younger cousins and nieces to get into an adventure sport that's theirs because of all those things. It makes the world easier. It brings you fitness, it brings you community, and you can hold yourself a little higher because when you go into work or study, you have this release where you can train your mind, you can train your body, you can go hang out with awesome people, you can go be a bit silly, you can push yourself really hard. And I think the more people see adventure sports like that, I think will change a lot of my hearts and minds about it.
Yeah, for sure.
What did coming out look like for you?
Coming out for me was quite a long process, I think. But I think that's quite a common thing. When I look back now, I could probably say that I kind of realized around sort of age 12, that age 12, 13, that I don't know, something I don't I, at the time I couldn't articulate it. I didn't have the language to articulate it, and I didn't have the exposure to the LGBTQIA plus community in front of me to be able to put words or an explanation to the feelings I was having, but I know that I was starting to have really conflicting feelings when I was around 12, 13, and a lot of feelings of shame that I can now put to realizing that I was gay. I think at the time I just didn't have, it just wasn't on my radar. And I definitely didn't have the language to articulate it. So I just kind of pushed those feelings away for quite a long time. And then definitely sort of, they'd come up to the surface, but I just kind of like pushed it away until I was around 17. Actually, like the climbing community was partly what helped give me that sort of exposure to the community, helped sort of normalize it for me a little bit. I met quite a lot of people that were openly gay, but I didn't realize for a while that they were openly gay. So it was just kind of like, it wasn't a thing. It was almost just like, it just completely normalized it for me. And that definitely helped me allow those feelings to come back to the surface and actually address them and actually put words to them. It was actually at my local climbing centre where I first came out. I was kind of outed, to be fair, but which I was a little bit upset about at the time, more so because I was worried about how people would react. But I think, in a way, I almost needed somebody to just, like, I'd kind of been making hints. I was kind of building myself up to do it. I think I did almost need somebody to give me that push. It worked out all right. It could have gone very wrong. So I was a little bit frustrated that that happened, but luckily everyone was very accepting and super supportive, and actually giving me that push to do it. Not that I'm advocating outing people at all. I was very fortunate that it went well, but was definitely very frustrated about it at the time. And then sort of like gradually told a few of my friends. By that point, I think I'd come to terms with it quite well. But I waited probably about another year before I told my parents, which I think is fairly normal. Yeah, out of I guess it's I think it's much harder to tell the people that are super close to you and you don't know how they're going to react. And obviously, like, they were completely fine with that. I was very fortunate that my parents have been super, super supportive. But I remember speaking to a friend of mine who had recently come out to her parents, and they were totally supportive, but I think in the moment didn't give her the reaction that she wanted. And I think there's so much, like, I think there should be an appreciation for how much pressure there is on parents and other people to react in the way that you want them to. Because, like, she made a good point. She was like, I've been building this up for 6 years and I've given them 2 seconds to give me the response that I wanted. And because there was an initial kind of shock, she got really upset about that. And they were super supportive. But I think, like, there is a lot of pressure from parents, and maybe people don't always sort of see that side. There's so much pressure on parents to say the right thing. They're like, do I say I've always known? Do I say, like, do I act shocked? Do I tell them well done? Like, what do I say? So I decided to just write my parents a letter, and I explained why I didn't tell them. I explained why I did it via a letter instead of face to face. I said, I want to give you guys time to process because I've had 6 years to process, or however long. I'm not, it's not fair for me to give you 6 seconds. Like, you don't have to ring me up or reply to this straight away. Just take your time to process it. If you've already known, you've already known. And they had, because I'd kind of dropped hints enough. I'd started shopping in the men's section for quite a while at this point. I was really heavily starting to drop some hints. I'd ripped all the posters down of boys from Disney Channel. I'd started putting lots of pictures of Hayley Williams up on my wall.
Classic
Yeah,
signs.
classic. But yeah, I think that was, like, for me, the best way to do it with my parents, because I really cared about how they were going to respond to it, and I wanted to make sure that they sort of didn't feel like I was ashamed to tell them, but also had the time to process it, which I think they deserved, and they were really supportive of it, which was, I was really fortunate to have, because I appreciate that not everyone is able to, like, get that support from parents. So yeah, I've been very fortunate in that sense. And friends have always been really supportive about it. On the whole, it's all been really positive.
Firstly, thank you for sharing that with me. I know it's not always the easiest thing to articulate, and as you get older as well, your hindsight around it all will change, and you'll be like, actually, it felt like this, it felt like that, and those feelings will change as you get older. I'm really sorry that someone outed you. I've had quite a few friends who that's happened to in adventure sports. I don't know if that's a recurring thing. If there are any researchers listening or any social anthropologists, that's a great thing to look down, I think. But also for anyone listening, outing someone is it's not a safe thing to do. It may appear funny as a joke, but I think in terms of people's safety and also the way they've been building it out, it kind of takes away their agency to present themselves to the world, especially when it comes to parents and things like that. And I've not heard that before. Just I don't know why I haven't around, you know, thinking about what parents say and think and do. And it's really interesting to hear that you wrote them a letter and you gave so much thought to giving them time to process and express their thoughts around it.
Yeah, I think having spoken to my friend who'd sort of not had the experience she wanted in coming out, I think it was partly like I owe it to them, but then also sort of felt like, you know, I don't want to, I almost didn't want to face what their initial reaction might be as well, because I knew that, you know, someone's like split second reaction isn't necessarily how they feel, and kind of take the pressure off things. I'm also terrible at talking about my feelings. So writing them down, I find a lot easier to articulate. I'm a lot better now. But at the time was sort of like, I'll be much better at articulating my feelings via a letter than anything.
One thing I'd really like to touch on, and we've spoken about before, and it's so great that there are so many queer, gay, LGBTQI plus role models in the adventure sport industry now. More and more people are coming out, finding safe spaces to do that. How do you feel about being a public figure, because you're a public figure, world champion climber, sponsored athlete? How do you feel about the presentation of being a gay climber?
Like I said before, like what really helped me when I was sort of coming to terms with my sexuality was just meeting people where initially I didn't realize they were gay, and it just sort of would be dropped into conversation at some point. And that was what I needed to normalize it, because there was a lot of fear and there was a lot of shame around me in terms of my sexuality, and I just needed somebody to make it feel normal. I already felt like an outcast. I already felt like the weird kid. I was like, God, not another thing. Like, I'm blind as well. Like, not another thing. And that's absolutely not how I feel now. But I think, you know, at the time, like when you're a teenager, you just kind of want to, or at least I did, want to just kind of blend into the background, and you don't want to be different. And now I'm absolutely up for embracing my differences and everyone's differences, because it's beautiful. But at the time when you're a teenager, you just want to be like everyone else. So I think meeting other people, for me, that almost didn't make a thing out of being gay, it was just dropped into conversation, really helped me make it feel a bit less scary, a bit less daunting. That's kind of what I try and be for other people. I think we need all sorts of types of gay climbers in the world. I think we need people who are, you know, out and proud and super vocal about it, because that's how we make real change in terms of equality and everything. But then equally on the other end of the spectrum, I think we also like people will also benefit from people who almost make it's just sort of, rather than I'm a gay climber, I'm a climber that just happens to be gay. And I think both are needed and both are great. And I think for me, I've sort of doing it for 12-year-old me, because that's what 12-year-old me needed, was somebody who was just a climber that, oh, on the side just happened to mention that they've got a girlfriend. And there's been so many kids that I've been coaching, like I've like coaching kids groups where I've just mentioned in passing, oh yeah, I've been off climbing with my girlfriend here or whatever. And then one has just been like, oh, right, okay, cool. My best friend's gay or whatever. And I remember having a really great conversation with a girl. I think she was about 10 or 11. And she was like, oh, yeah, my best friend's gay. And she was like, I'm not really sure what I am. She was like, I think I like girls and boys. I'm not really sure. And I was like, that's great. Like, that's
Oh,
amazing. And I was just like, I'm so, like, it makes me so happy that you guys can talk about this openly and that people can be openly gay in your school, because that was just not a thing at my school. Like, it was not an option. Even if I'd been able to articulate my sexuality when I was in school, there was absolutely no way I would have come out, because it just wouldn't have been safe. So it made me so happy. I got like a bit emotional. This is going to be a theme. I get a bit emotional that she was able to do that and that her friends were able to do that. And that was just like, and it was just normal. So I think in terms of like how I identify publicly as gay, I'm absolutely open to talking about being gay, and I'll drop girlfriend or like my sexuality into conversation all the time. But I think I prefer to make it a bit more of a subtle drop into a conversation, because I think that's what teenage me needed. So I'm kind of doing it for all the other teenage me's out there.
that is so sweet, and thank you for sharing that. And that is the predominant reason I set up this podcast, so people could hear different stories and different experiences. Because when I was younger, I thought there was only one way to be gay or be in the community, but actually there's this entire beautiful spectrum that you can and also move around on, and you can choose how to be and where to be and what to be, and it's it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
As you've gotten older, has the language you use to describe yourself changed at all?
A little bit, yeah. I think I still prefer to identify as gay for multiple reasons. I think partly because I feel like sexuality is all quite fluid, I I think like, so in terms of like, if I was to identify as a lesbian, then sometimes I feel like that can be kind of like almost like dichotomize into like, you just date men or you just date women, which, and it's entirely open to interpretation for anyone. Like, what does lesbian mean? What does gay mean? It's completely however you interpret it.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
me, I feel like gay covers all of that and kind of is more all encompassing, and it's definitely a term that always made me feel a bit more comfortable. When I was younger, I was definitely quite opposed to being called a lesbian. I think I associated with a lot of negative things from school, because I was always, even though I wasn't out in school, there was always kind of talk from people that I might be. And it was always used as an insult. It was always used by people who bullied me. And I just really disliked that term. More so now, I'm kind of, now that I've grown up a bit and been able to reflect, I can kind of take away, like, take the power away from that and take some of those associations away with the term, and remember that it is just a word and it can mean whatever you want it to mean. It's just words, it's just language. At the same time, gay still makes me feel more comfortable, and that makes me feel empowered, and that's what matters. But I definitely feel less shame if I was to be called a lesbian. I just generally don't tend to refer to myself as a lesbian, because gay feels, I feel much more of a connection to that word.
That's one of the incredible things about being part of this community, this self-expression, and the evolution of that is so normal. And if
Mm.
you next week, next year decide to say lesbian, to say queer, to say bi, it people would say, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's all it is."
And I think like quite often there can be so much pressure from some people to identify or to put you into a box or whatever. And I remember speaking to some people that, I've spoken to people that are like quite newly identifying with the community, shall we say, and it's sort of been like, oh well, like I identify as bi, but I guess like I'm attracted to everyone. So does that make me pan, or what does this mean? How is? And I've just been like, it's whatever you want it to be. Like, what makes you feel comfy? Like, what makes you feel happy? What makes you feel empowered? Because yeah, they're just words. Like it's whatever's going to make you feel the most you is what all that's important.
You spoke at last year's Women's Climbing Symposium. How was that?
Yeah, it was really good. I've spoken at the Women's Climbing Symposium a couple of times now, and I've also just attended as a guest as well. And it's always such a nice vibe. Everyone's really welcoming, and I think this time compared to the last time that I spoke, I was able to delve a little bit deeper into stuff and really get into the nitty gritty and talk about things that I was really psyched on, and especially now studying sports psych, kind of draw on some of the things that I've learned as an athlete and things that I can like hopefully pass on to other people, like lessons that I've learned through sport, particularly from a psychological point of view, that are like quite useful and things that I'm passionate about. Whereas the first time that I spoke was kind of right at the beginning when I'd maybe only been competing for a year or so. So it was at the time very much more like, what is paraclimbing? How do paraclimbing comps work? How blind are you? What does that look like? Which is obviously super useful to be able to raise awareness, but it was kind of cool this time around that people are aware enough about that sort of stuff. First of all, that's a really great thing in itself, that people are aware of what paraclimbing is and they understand a bit more about how different disabilities work, and that being visually impaired doesn't mean that you just can't see anything. Like people understand a little bit more about that sort of stuff, so that I was able to talk a little bit more about just being a climber and just talk about climbing, which was really nice.
You've mentioned you're also a coach and have gone back to university to carry on studying in that area. What brought that about for you?
So my original undergraduate degree was in it was in digital media, and I was specialising in web development and web design. So, like I said, little computer nerd. I had very much had planned to carry on a career in web development or front end web development or something, and was really psyched on that. I really enjoyed the problem solving associated with coding, but actually realised that I hated sitting at a computer for 8 hours a day, every day, staring at a computer screen, writing code, as much as the problem solving was quite interesting. I graduated from my undergraduate degree right when we went into lockdown. And in terms of at that point, I'd concluded that web development wasn't for me. I'd spent a bit of time working in the industry on a placement and absolutely hated it for various reasons. It was a bit of a rocky year anyway, but definitely felt like as I'd started to learn a little bit more about myself and become a bit more reflective as a person, sort of realized that it didn't align with any of my values at all, and inherently wasn't a bad career path at all. And there were definitely still elements that I found interesting, but at the very core, it just didn't align with my values. So when we went into lockdown, I had a lot of time to sit with a lot of uncomfortable feelings that I had at the time, and address a lot of things in my life that weren't quite adding up, or were causing me a lot of discomfort. And kind of took the time to sit with those feelings and be a little bit more reflective. At the time, I'd decided that I wanted to pursue coaching a little bit more. So I'd started doing some coaching courses and doing a bit of reading and listening to podcasts and stuff. And a lot of these incorporated a bit of sports psychology in them as well. And I kind of used those at the time personally to sort of help me as an athlete. And a lot of the things that I was listening to were sort of encouraging you to reflect on your values and think about how important that and look at how important that would be in informing your future goals and your sort of finding your almost your purpose. So I took some time to be a bit more reflective and consider what my own values were. That was when I sort of realized that the current career path I was on was absolutely didn't align with that. And I remember being off on a walk with my cousin, because, that's all we did through lockdown, was go on lots of really long walks. And she was like, have you thought about sports psychology? And I think I just needed somebody to validate my feelings, because I think that had been in the back of my mind of that would be really cool. That would be really interesting. And I had a friend, Emma Wood, who you probably know, who is like sort of, I look up to her so much because she's got so much knowledge, and she's like so great, amazing at what she does. And obviously she's currently on the training pathway to qualify as a sports psych as well. And I looked up to her so much, and really sort of, I think had it in the back of my mind that I would absolutely love to follow along a similar pathway, but I guess just didn't think that I would be capable of doing it, and didn't see a pathway. And I think I needed somebody just to kind of validate that and be like, yeah, you could do it. And it was quite fortunate that I had all of that free time in lockdown to look into what retraining to be a sports psych would look like. I gave Emma a ring and was like, I want to do this, and like, how do I do it? And I think she squealed a little bit over the phone and was like, I'm so excited for you. Like, this makes so much sense, and I'm really, really happy for you. So since then have planned out the long path to eventually qualify, and I'm into my second master's degree now. So I did a first one in psychology, and then the second one in sports psychology, and then I'm looking down the routes of applied training and PhD and all of those things. But it's going really well, and I'm really excited about it. And it comes sort of hand in hand with coaching as well. I think, like, after lockdown, I worked for a couple of years as a head coach of a climbing centre down in Swindon, and I kind of took those couple of years to let the idea of switching careers into sports psych just sit in the back of my mind, because I sort of figured that you can't entirely make a super informed decision and commit to however many years of training from a desk in lockdown. Like, that's maybe not the best place to make a huge life decision and know that it's going to be the right one. So I was like, I'm going to take a year or two to like mull it over, do something that's still in a similar area. And it was in that time I really enjoyed coaching, and I still love coaching. But what really kind of like lit up like the passion in me was when I could see the psychological side of this of things come out. Like, when I was not necessarily working with people on mental skills, but when I saw the sort of development in people psychologically, and I saw, like, whenever we were sort of doing more head game type stuff, that was when I got really, really psyched. And that was when I felt that real sort of like passion come through. And I think that just consolidated for me that, like, this is the right route for me. It's that psychological side of things that I want to really support people through. I'm halfway through this master's degree and really enjoying it so far. So I'm excited, if not a little bit nervous about the next however many years worth of training. But I think a little bit of nerves is good. It just means you care.
You are on your second master's degree. That is phenomenal. The intelligence is fantastic. I applaud you so much for that. And then on top of all of that and your training, you're also a sponsored athlete. And I find that whole premise fascinating. And I'd just like to know from your point of view, and I don't want to put any words in your mouth, and I'm wondering if there is any pressure around hitting certain goals, being on social media a lot. What is it like for you being a sponsored athlete?
The pressure is probably less than maybe a lot of other athletes who have sort of more sponsors than I do, but there is always a level of pressure in terms of, I'm not like a fully sponsored athlete in terms of, I maybe don't have as much pressure as some of the others do, but there is definitely a lot of pressure that I put on myself, I think, to, especially when you hit setbacks like injury. Like, I broke my ankle maybe 3 months ago now, and I'm still not able to climb on two legs properly. I can a little bit, but it's still limited, and I can't take impact. And I can't climb to the same like standard that I usually have been. And setbacks like that can definitely make things quite challenging because you feel like, oh, I need to be constantly getting stronger. I need to be showing everybody how strong I am and all that sort of stuff. And first of all, that's absolutely not the case. I think a lot of people tend to respond better to just seeing the human side of everyone. I'm starting to realize that a little bit more, and actually seeing you having setbacks and how you've dealt with them, and not and also especially like people showing people that you're not always positive, I think can be quite comforting as well, and something that I maybe don't do enough of publicly. When I broke my ankle right at the start, I was incredibly positive about it. I've had a lot of injuries by this point, and was very sort of practical about it, and it was fine. But I'll be very honest and say that it has been really, really frustrating for the last maybe month or two, because I've kind of reached the point where I'm out of the moon boot and walking around, but still can't do everything that I want to be able to do without pain. And this part of the rehab process is much more uncertain and much more frustrating, I think, because you've not got an end goal. When you're in the moon boot, it's like, you're going to be out in 8 weeks or whatever. But then it's like, right, I don't know how long it's going to be until the swelling goes down, until the mobility comes back, until I can climb to the same standard again. And that's definitely a side that I probably don't share enough on social media, that people probably would actually really benefit from. To be honest, I'm not great at social media when it comes to myself anyway. I used to be very camera shy, and I'm less camera shy now, but definitely still not necessarily great at selling myself on social media, and definitely feel pressure that I need to do that for sponsors and stuff like that. There's definitely a pressure of feeling like I need to be always achieving, always strong, always looking strong, and always present on social media when I don't necessarily always want to be. So I definitely don't do as good a job of being present as some people do, but I think for my own well-being, I think that's what I need. If I'm off on a day out climbing, or or actually just like off on a training session, and I'm kind of in my own head and I'm just like cracking on doing me, or I'm out with friends on a nice climbing trip, the last thing I'm thinking about is getting a photo of me looking strong. I'm very much just wanting to be in the moment, and I appreciate that the sponsors don't necessarily want that. They want to see photos of you in their kit. But also, I think there needs to be a balance, and for me and my enjoyment and my like ability to be present in the moment, it's important for me that I put my phone away for that. If I'm like, I don't know, projecting a hard climb or something, if I've then sent it, I'll probably be like, right, okay, now can someone come and take a photo of me on it? Because I don't like the pressure of like filming myself when I'm on the project. But yeah, there is definitely to kind of go back to the start of the question, there is definitely a pressure, and I think that's mostly pressure that I put on myself. And it can definitely get quite stressful trying to balance that and studying and training and everything, especially when you then get setbacks. It all gets quite challenging. But yeah, I think I try and get a decent balance in terms of like being able to switch off from social media and stuff and get a little bit of headspace and just be present. It's still a balance I'm trying to strike for sure.
I believe all of that only makes you a human, I'm afraid to say. Sorry about that. I could talk to you all day, and there are a million more questions I have, but I have to go to my penultimate question, I'm afraid. I would love to know what you are looking forward to in the future.
Yeah, so the future at the moment is both looking really exciting, and also a bit uncertain, which can be both exciting and also very nerve-wracking, um, both in terms of like career, climbing, competitions, everything. At the minute, I'm still injured, so that is creating a lot of uncertainty, which has created some frustration. But I've also got a lot of cool trips planned over the next year that I'm really excited about, both within climbing and out of climbing. Like out of climbing, I'm also really psyched on mountain biking, and I've just got a lot of stuff to start doing some bike packing, which I'm really looking forward to. So yeah, some really cool trips planned that I'm psyched for. I think it's going to be quite nice to have some goals away from competition climbing, because that sort of environment and that headspace can be like quite stressful sometimes. And definitely sort of I took a bit of a step back after the last competition season, just to have a little bit of a break from the competition headspace and just climb for the sake of it, and kind of rekindled my love with climbing, because sometimes you can get bogged down in what training for competitions and stuff loads. So taking that little bit of a step back and just climbing with people that weren't competition climbers, climbing with people that just climbed for the sake of it, and obviously cared a little bit whether they had a good day or bad day, but it didn't ruin their week if they didn't climb their highest grade, was really, really refreshing and really sort of reminded me why I love climbing. I'm really looking forward to like going on like some cool climbing trips. And I sort of realized as well in the competition mindset that I've maybe been kind of limiting myself to doing what I know a little bit too much, and being a bit afraid to try new things that I wouldn't necessarily be the best at. I think especially when you're a competitive person, or when you're a like competitive athlete as well, and a big perfectionist like I am, there can be a lot of fear of trying new things, out of fear of not being the best at them. But going back to what I was saying about values, like some of my really core values are being curious about things and being adventurous. And I kind of have been reminding myself recently that like actually, if I want to learn and grow as a person and I want to be curious about new things, I have to be open to not being the best at them. And actually, I've been really enjoying seeing the learning when I'm doing newer things, and just like being able to see that development much quicker than, when you've been doing something for years, you don't really see the day-to-day development. But it's quite nice to try new things and just like see the progression really quickly. It can be really satisfying. So yeah, I've been really enjoying doing a bit more of new things like mountain biking and doing more cycling and other things like that. Before I broke my ankle, I was getting into running as well and was getting quite excited about seeing the progression there. So I can't wait to start running again. That'll be really cool. I've also been sort of doing more outdoor climbing, which is going to feed into some of the trips that I'm doing over the next year, which has been quite a challenging sort of experience, because I'm like, in terms of outdoor sport climbing, is something that I've not actually done that much of, which surprised people. And I think I talked about this at the Women's Climbing Symposium, that especially in competitions, because we climb on a top rope, and quite often I end up training in a bouldering centre or on a circuit board, that I don't actually spend that much time on lead. And it's been a while since I've been on lead, and the lead fear has massively come back. And I was kind of like, I hadn't really talked about it for a while. I was a bit like ashamed of it. But then I was like, no, I should be completely open about talking about this, because I'm sure there are so many people in this room that are also terrified on lead. And if anything, it's just comforting to know that somebody else is feeling that way, especially like, when you're stood up talking at an event, people kind of assume that you've probably got no fear and that you're probably not going to be absolutely terrified on lead. And I think it can be comforting to see that like those people that kind of present themselves in a certain way, especially on the competition scene, are very human and do have a lot of fears around things like lead. So I've been I've been enjoying trying to get over that. And there's been some challenging times getting over some of my fears and dealing with being rubbish at stuff, but it's exciting, it's fun. I've been enjoying the learning process.
I appreciate you sharing all of that. I know when you're on a particular like public pedestal, sharing what you're going to do in the future can be quite daunting.
Yeah, it can be.
Lastly, if people want to find you online, where can they look you up?
So my Instagram is abbie.paraclimbing. That's pretty much the only place you can find me online. And I'm probably on social media a little bit less than I used to be, but But yeah, I'm still knocking about.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for your time and honesty today, Abbie. I really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Abbie really is an all-round incredible woman, and the world of climbing is all the better for having her in it. I cannot wait to see what she gets up to on her next adventures. Before I sign off, I'd like to take a wee minute to thank all of the lovely people that have reached out on Instagram and sent emails. It really does make my day when I read you've enjoyed listening, you've been inspired, discovered a new brilliant person, etc. It's pretty much the reason why I set up the podcast, so no one would feel alone, we'd find more role models, and we just realise there's not one way to be in our community, and lots of other reasons too. I've got some really great guests lined up for the next few episodes, and I cannot wait to put more episodes out. So you'll be hearing from me next month. Take care. Bye.